The Dybbuk Box is a small, antique wine cabinet that has earned a reputation as one of the most haunted objects in the world. It looks like a simple piece of furniture, but the warning attached to it is absolute. You must never open it. The claim is that the cabinet isn't just haunted by a ghost, but acts as a prison for a malicious spirit. If the seal is broken, the entity is released, and it doesn't just float around the room, it attaches itself to the nearest person. This creates a terrifying contradiction. We are told this is a physical object you can touch and move, yet it possesses a property that transcends wood and glass, acting as a doorway for something that shouldn't exist in our world. And if late-night mysteries like this are your kind of rabbit hole, like the video and subscribe to Sleepwalk Files. The mystery we have to solve is whether this box is a genuine vessel for a prehistoric evil, or if the horror is something we've manufactured ourselves. To understand why this box is so feared, you have to look at what is supposedly inside. Observe the physical object that serves as the center of this paranormal obsession. The antique wine cabinet is presented as a containment unit designed to trap a dislocated soul. The spirit is called a Dybbuk. The word comes from the Hebrew verb dybbuk, which means to adhere or to cling. In Jewish mythology, a Dybbuk is the dislocated soul of a dead person, rather than a demon from hell. It's like a spiritual parasite. According to these traditions, if a person dies without completing their business on earth, their soul can't move on. Instead, it clings to a living host, hijacking their body to finish whatever task was left undone. Once the goal is reached or the spirit is forced out through an exorcism, the Dybbuk finally detaches and leaves for the afterlife. This detail changes the nature of the box. It isn't a haunted piece of furniture where a ghost happens to linger. If the lore is true, the cabinet was designed to house a soul with a goal. It's a containment unit. This implies that whoever put the spirit in there knew exactly what they were doing, and they wanted to make sure that whatever business this soul had left unfinished stayed locked away. This idea of a clinging spirit has moved from ancient law into the center of modern pop culture. We see it in movies like The Possession, where a girl finds a box at a yard sale and becomes obsessed with it. But the real-world claims are more direct. The box ended up in a museum of haunted items owned by a famous paranormal investigator who built a 4-hour TV special around the act of opening it. Then there are the people who actually touched it. In 2017, the artist Post Malone appeared on that same paranormal show. He touched the Dybbuk Box during the episode, and he later claimed that a string of bad events hit his life immediately after. For believers, this is concrete proof. The spirit didn't need the box to be opened, it just needed a physical connection to a new host. If a simple touch can trigger a life-altering streak of misfortune, it suggests the entity inside is actively looking for a way out. But if the box is truly a vessel for a dislocated soul, where did it actually come from? The story begins in 2001 with a man named Kevin Mannis, a furniture refurbisher who found the cabinet at an estate sale. He claimed the box came from a woman who had escaped Nazi Germany, and that her granddaughter warned him never to open it. It sounds like a perfect Gothic tragedy, but as you look closer at the timeline, the story starts to fray. To understand why this cabinet is so feared, you have to understand what a Dybbuk actually is. In Jewish mythology, a Dybbuk is more than a ghost. The word comes from the Hebrew verb meaning to cling or adhere. It's a dislocated soul, a person who died with unfinished business and can't move on, so it hitches a ride in a living host to get things done. These stories aren't a modern internet invention. They became prominent in the mid-16th century, specifically in Ottoman Galilee. In the village of Safed, a culture of mysticism grew where people believed in the movement of souls. One early account from the 1540s describes a young boy possessed by the soul of a sinner. The soul had supposedly been living in a dog first, and it entered the boy for vengeance after the boy's father killed the animal. For a long time, these accounts stayed in small circles or religious manuscripts. Then, in 1920, a writer named Essen Sky wrote a play called The Dybbuk. He took these old folk beliefs and put them on a stage, turning the Dybbuk into a literary phenomenon. He focused on the more disturbing side of the myth, the idea of male spirits possessing women on the eve of their weddings. By the 1930s, the story hit the silver screen in a classic Yiddish film. Looking at this history, a pattern emerges. The Dybbuk is a way to explain things that feel impossible: repressed trauma, family tension, or sudden illness. In psychology, some call it a hysterical syndrome, a physical manifestation of a mental break. But for those who believe in the supernatural, this centuries-old lineage provides a believable framework. If the Dybbuk is a real historical force that clings to people, then it's possible for that force to be trapped in an object. That brings us back to the physical object itself. Before it was known as a haunted item, it was just a piece of second-hand furniture. In 2001, a man named Kevin Mannis was looking for things to flip. Mannis was a furniture refurbisher and a writer who scouted estate sales for hidden gems. He found a small antique wine cabinet that looked like a standard piece of liquor storage. He bought it without knowing the history, but the transition from a simple antique to a cursed object happened almost immediately. According to the story, the cabinet came from a woman who had fled Nazi Germany. When Mannis acquired it, he was told by the woman's granddaughter that the box must never, under any circumstances, be opened. One moment, it's a dusty cabinet at a yard sale. The next, it's a containment vessel for a malicious entity from the 16th century. If Mannis had just sanded it down and sold it for a profit, the legend would have died at that estate sale. But because he leaned into the warning, he turned a piece of wood into a prison. This creates a dangerous scenario. If the Dybbuk is a soul that clings to a host to finish its business, and that soul has been trapped in a box for decades, what happens to that spirit while it waits? Does it grow more desperate, more angry? And if Kevin Mannis believed the warning, why did he keep the box in his home? Kevin Mannis sold a tragedy. When he put the wine cabinet up for sale, he gave potential buyers a specific origin story to explain why the object felt dangerous. He claimed he bought the box from a 103-year-old woman who had survived the Holocaust. According to Mannis, she had escaped Nazi Germany while the rest of her family was murdered by the Third Reich. This detail changed the box from a spooky curiosity into something heavy. By linking the haunting to the Holocaust, the story tapped into a real historical trauma. In the world of the paranormal, trauma is often seen as the fuel for a haunting. If a spirit is born from that kind of systemic horror and loss, the belief is that the entity is a concentrated mass of grief and rage. It gave the box an emotional urgency. It was a remnant of one of the darkest chapters in human history. But when you lay that story out on a timeline, the pieces don't fit. Mannis told buyers that the woman's entire family had been killed during the Nazi regime. He used that total loss to build the atmosphere of the haunting. Yet, in another part of his narrative, he claimed that he had actually met the woman's granddaughter. That is a glaring contradiction. If the woman was the sole survivor of her family, there is no granddaughter to give a warning. If there was a granddaughter, then the story about the total annihilation of her family was a lie. It's the kind of slip-up that happens when someone is improvising a script in real time. They add a detail to make the story more heartbreaking, then add another to make it feel more personal, and they forget that the two things cancel each other out. For those who believed in the box, these gaps were just confusing memories from an old woman. But for others, it looked like a professional writer was layering a story to see what would stick. Kevin Mannis was a writer. He knew how to build a plot. He knew that a cursed object sells for more than a used object. As the legend grew, people wanted proof. They wanted to see something that showed a spirit was actually inside. To provide that evidence, Mannis took a tool and physically modified the cabinet. He carved letters and messages into the back of the wood. He wasn't restoring the furniture. He was manufacturing a haunting. By carving these messages, he created a physical trail for buyers to find. It's a classic trick of the trade. If you tell someone a box is haunted, they might doubt you. But if they turn the box over and see strange cryptic writing etched into the grain, They stop questioning the story and start fearing the object. The physical evidence validated the oral legend. Think about the psychology of that for a second. Once you see a physical mark, your brain stops looking for the lie and starts looking for the meaning. The carvings turned the box into a puzzle. Buyers weren't asking, "Did this man make this up?" anymore. Instead, they were asking, "What does this message mean, and what happens if I ignore it?" The origin story was a fabrication, and the evidence was carved by a man with a chisel. Then the haunting was essentially a piece of performance art. But that's where the theory gets complicated. In the paranormal community, there is a concept called tulpa, or thought forms. The idea is that if enough people believe in something with enough intensity, they can actually create a psychic entity. What if Manus didn't start with a demon, but by creating a story so convincing that he accidentally invited something in? What if the act of carving those letters and lying about the Holocaust created a vacuum of fear that something else decided to fill? It would mean the box started as a hoax, but through the collective belief of everyone who bought into the story, it became a genuine battery for negative energy. This leads to a disturbing possibility. If the haunting was manufactured, then every person who claimed to be cursed by the box wasn't fighting a Jewish spirit from the 16th century. They were fighting a suggestion. They were experiencing a psychological contagion where the fear of the box created the very symptoms they were terrified of. But as the box moved from eBay to the hands of collectors, and eventually into a high-profile museum, the reports of activity didn't stop. They actually got worse. The people interacting with it weren't just reading a story on a website, they were in the room with the object. They reported smells, sounds, and physical ailments that didn't seem to align with a simple psychological trick. The provenance was a lie. Why did the effects feel so real? It suggests that the box might not be the source of the horror, but a trigger. It raises the question of whether the object itself is cursed, or if the story is a trap that opens the owner up to something else entirely. Kevin Manus didn't just keep the cabinet in his home, he decided to put it on eBay. Now, usually when you list a piece of old furniture online, you talk about the wood grain, the dimensions, or the era it came from, but Manus did something different. He marketed the box with a stern, explicit warning: it must never be opened. The listing on eBay didn't focus on the furniture's age or the wood grain. This explicit warning of danger transformed a simple wine cabinet into a high-value occult curiosity. He told potential buyers that the box contained a Dybbuk and that breaking the seal would release a malicious spirit that could attach itself to the new owner. In the world of online auctions, this is a strange move. Normally, a warning that an object is dangerous or cursed would drive buyers away, but for a specific kind of collector, the danger became the primary selling point. The more the warning insisted on the risk, the more valuable the object became. It was a gamble and a piece of forbidden history. By framing the box as a threat, Manus moved it from furniture into the occult. He created a brand of fear that could be shipped in a cardboard box via UPS. Once the box hit the public market, it stopped being a private secret and became a challenge. If the box was truly that dangerous, people wanted to see it. They wanted to know what happened when the rules were broken. That curiosity eventually led the box to a museum of haunted items. This wasn't a quiet gallery in a basement. It was a collection owned by one of the most famous paranormal show hosts in the world. The box was no longer a niche eBay curiosity. It was now a centerpiece of mainstream entertainment. The show host didn't put the box on a shelf with a plaque. He produced a 4-hour Halloween TV special centered entirely on the act of opening it. The lights were low, the camera zoomed in on the antique wood, and the tension built for hours. The entire event was designed around the anticipation of the breach. Opening the box was treated like a ritual, a televised dare. When you take an object like this and put it under studio lights for millions of viewers, the nature of the object changes. It becomes a prop in a larger story. The danger is still there, but it's a curated danger, the kind of thrill you pay for with a cable subscription. But for those who believe in the Dybbuk, this wasn't a show. They saw it as a reckless invitation. They believed the host was playing with a fire that doesn't go out when the cameras stop rolling. If the box was just a prop, the story should have ended when the credits rolled. But the rumor of the box's power continued to grow as it touched the world of celebrity. In 2017, the musician Post Malone appeared as a guest on that same paranormal show. During the episode, he did something the original warnings had strictly forbidden. He touched the Dybbuk box. At first, it seemed like a typical celebrity cameo, a brief moment of curiosity. But after filming, Post Malone claimed that loads of bad things started happening to him. He expressed a genuine conviction that his streak of bad luck was a direct result of touching the cabinet. When a regular person claims a haunted object ruined their life, it's often dismissed as a personal tragedy or a coincidence. But when a global superstar validates the box's power, the narrative shifts. Post Malone's experience gave the box a kind of celebrity endorsement. It suggested that the entity inside didn't care about fame or money, it only cared about the contact. You believe the theory, the box is like a spiritual landmine. It doesn't matter who steps on it or why they were invited to the museum. The moment the physical boundary is crossed, the connection is made. The consequence isn't a jump scare on a TV screen. It's a slow leak of misfortune into your actual life. This creates a strange paradox. There is evidence that the box was a calculated creation, a furniture refurbisher, adding fake letters to the back of a cabinet to drive up the eBay price. Yet there is also a trail of people who feel they've been genuinely harmed by it. The box is a hoax? Then the bad things happening to people are the result of a powerful psychological suggestion. This is called the nocebo effect. It's the opposite of a placebo. Instead of getting better because you believe a sugar pill is medicine, you actually get sick or experience misfortune because you believe you've been cursed. Your mind creates the symptoms because it expects them. But if the box is real, then the fame of the object is the most dangerous part. Every TV special, every celebrity touch, and every viral post is another way of spreading the invitation. The box is a prison for one spirit, but it's also a beacon. As the world's attention focused on this small wooden cabinet, people began to wonder if the spirit wasn't just trapped inside, but was using the fame of the box to find new ways out. The story of the box didn't stay on eBay. It leaked into the way we imagine horror. By 2012, Hollywood had picked up the blueprint. In the movie The Possession, a young girl finds an antique Jewish box at a yard sale. Her father buys it for her, and almost immediately, her life falls apart. She becomes obsessed with the object, and the film follows the inevitable descent into a paranormal attack. This wasn't a Western trend. An Indian horror film called The Dybbuk followed a nearly identical path. A married couple brings home an antique Jewish box, and their home becomes a site of supernatural chaos. Both movies rely on the same trigger, a mundane purchase at a flea market or a sale that unlocks an ancient trapped malice. When a story repeats like this across different cultures and languages, it becomes a trope. The Dybbuk box became shorthand for a specific kind of fear, the idea that you can accidentally buy a prison for a demon. It turned a niche piece of Jewish folklore into a global product. But as the movies made the idea famous, something stranger happened. People didn't want to just watch the story, they wanted to own the object. This created a vacuum. There's only one original cabinet from the Kevin Mannis story, and it ended up in a museum of haunted items. But the internet is full of people who want their own brush with the occult. On platforms like Reddit, a secondary market emerged. Users began discussing how to manufacture their own authentic Dybbuk boxes. The process is low-tech. People take generic old boxes and fill them with miscellaneous items to make them look ancient. They melt candle wax over the seams to simulate a ritual seal. They might scratch symbols into the wood or add old photographs to give the object a fake history. It's a strange cycle. A story started as a fabrication to increase the resale value of a piece of furniture, which inspired multi-million-dollar movies which then inspired people to build fake cursed objects for a thrill. The legend created a demand for something that can't be proven. You can't run a lab test on a curse. You can't use a Geiger counter to find a Dybbuk. All you have is the story you tell yourself while you're looking at the box. This brings up a troubling possibility. If the market is flooded with fake boxes and the original was a hoax created by a furniture refurbisher, why does the fear persist? Why do people still report feeling a presence or experiencing bad luck after touching one? Take the musician Post Malone. He appeared on a paranormal show and touched the original Dybbuk Box. Later, he claimed a string of bad events happened in his life, and he became convinced it was because of that one physical contact. Whether it's a celebrity or a Reddit user with a wax-sealed box, the psychological effect is the same. The object becomes a lightning rod for everything that goes wrong in a person's life. The box is just a prop. The real haunting isn't inside the wood. It's in the way we're wired to seek out these patterns. It makes you wonder if the box is actually a mirror, reflecting whatever we're already afraid of. That leads to the final piece of the puzzle. What happens when the person who started the lie finally admits it? When people reported the horrors of the box, the sudden illness, the nightmares, the feeling of being watched, they were describing a very specific kind of terror. It felt like a possession, but psychological literature offers a different way to describe these experiences. Some have categorized Dybbuk possession as a hysterical syndrome. In plain terms, the brain reacts to extreme stress or a repressed conflict by creating a physical or emotional crisis. When someone is told they're in the presence of a malicious spirit, their mind can produce the symptoms of being haunted. The anxiety becomes a loop. You expect something bad to happen. You notice a strange noise or a sudden chill, and your brain registers it as proof of the demon. The bad things reported by the owners weren't necessarily coming from inside the wine cabinet, but from the suggestion that the cabinet was dangerous. This suggests the box is just a mirror. It doesn't hold a spirit, it holds a story. Once you believe the story, your mind does the rest of the work, turning a piece of old furniture into a catalyst for a mental breakdown. If the horror was just a psychological reaction, the box itself was harmless. Which leads to the only remaining question: why go to such lengths to make a simple liquor cabinet seem lethal? The answer arrived not through a priest or a psychologist, but through a social media feed. On October 24, 2015, a Facebook post appeared. Kevin Mannis, the man who started it all, finally spoke the truth. He confessed that he had created the entire elaborate backstory. There was no woman who escaped Nazi Germany. There was no granddaughter with a dire warning. There was no ancient clinging soul trapped in the wood. Mannis admitted that the provenance of the box, the history that made it the most haunted item in the world, was a financial strategy. He was a furniture refurbisher. He knew that a plain antique wine cabinet wouldn't fetch a high price at an auction, but a cursed object with a tragic, occult history would. He sold a legend. He crafted a narrative designed to increase the resale value, turning a bargain bin find into a viral sensation. The terror that people felt, the nights they spent awake in fear, and the frantic searches for exorcists were all based on a marketing ploy. The most haunted item in the world was actually just a very successful piece of fiction. It's a reminder of how easily we can be led into the dark when the story is compelling enough. We wanted to believe in the Dybbuk because the idea of a clinging soul is more interesting than the idea of a dishonest salesman. We accepted the nightmare because it felt more cinematic than the truth. Now, the box still exists. It's still out there, moving from one collector to another. Some people still believe the curse is real, even knowing the truth, because the experience of the fear was so visceral. But the real haunting isn't a spirit from the 16th century. It's the realization that a few well-placed lies can make 1,000 strangers tremble in their own homes. A simple story can make us see demons in a wooden box. What else are we believing simply because the story is too good to be true? If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to Sleepwalk Files to stay up to date with new mysteries and long videos to fall asleep to every night.